He did want to confront me, which was fair enough. We shouldn't have been in the same room at certain points. I haven't drawn a line under it. A lot of people were perceived by the press of being afraid of Phil. And I just wanted to prove that we weren't.
Hello, welcome along to this week's edition of the Tungsten Talk here at the MODUS Super Series, where we delve into the life and times of some of the biggest names in darts. And today we've got a friend and colleague with me in the studio, the asset Paul Nicholson. Now, we've spoken so much in our time sat together in a commentary box about the highs of your career, some of the big moments of your career, but let's go back to the start, where it all began for yourself.
What would you like to know?
When did you first pick it up? When was darts actually first something that was introduced to yourself?
Well, when I was 3 years old, it was 1982. And that's the time where darts was really starting to be thrust into people's living rooms on a regular basis, with John Lowe, with Eric Bristow, with Bobby George, Jockey Wilson, and all of the clan. So if you consider there weren't that many channels to watch back then, darts was on terrestrial TV all the time. It was on Grandstand, it was on ITV Sport. So when you think about what was, something you can actually get behind in a working class background, we looked at darts as kids, and my parents looked at it and said, this is remarkable. I mean, my mum was apparently pregnant with me when she won a trophy, so maybe it was in my blood. But when I saw something on television as a kid, my immediate reaction was, I want to go and do that. Now, I did everything from playing darts, playing football, running around the block like I was someone at the 1986 Commonwealth Games. I tried to be Mick Hill as a javelin thrower, so I asked my dad to make me a javelin out of a piece of bamboo, and he did so. He was so forthcoming with things like that, but darts for me was always something I was just a little bit better at than anything else.
So it was something that was pretty much in the blood then from a very young age?
Yeah, I grew up in a small village called East Hertford in Northumberland, and this place was cut off from the world as far as I was concerned. You either got into trouble or you were good at something. And in order to get out of that kind of mold, you needed to be really good at something. Now, I moved from there when I was 9 years old, and darts just seemed, from the big spectrum of getting to Lakeside or anything like that, it seemed like a complete world away. For me, all I wanted to do was play as a kid. There was no youth system, there was no Junior Darts Corporation or anything like that for me. I just wanted to throw at a dartboard, play against my dad, and just enjoy it.
How good were you so quickly?
Pretty good. I don't remember a time where my dad ever beat me, even from being a child. Mm-hmm. But he was really clever, well before his time when it came to coaching a kid. I only understood this when I became a coach myself, because what he did was, he said, I don't want to put the board on the wall. I want to put it on the stairs, and you can throw when the board is on a certain step. So as it got higher and further away, I could progress. And there was a time where we'd put on the wall. But there was actually a funny moment as a kid. We couldn't afford a dartboard, and we didn't even know where to get one, unless it was from mail order from Red Dragon, and we couldn't afford it. So I fashioned other ways that I could throw darts. We've heard from people who have thrown at trees. I had an old sled that was made out of old fence panels, and I would throw at the 3 panels on the sled. So I'd throw one dart at the top, one dart at the middle, one dart at the bottom. I'd throw at cardboard boxes that I would draw dartboards on and everything like that. But the funny thing is, I didn't even have a set of darts. I stole my mum's. And the afternoon that I broke one of the points, well, I didn't have a set of darts in my hand for quite a while.
Granted, for sure. So let's move it forward then a few years. So you go from playing at home when you were a youngster, and then I suppose naturally you move into teenage years. Is that where darts becomes a bit more of an influence on your life?
Yeah, I think when you look around, say, 1991, that was quite an influential year for me, because I was 12, my life was changing, and Dennis Priestley became world champion, and I just looked at that guy and thought, you are so cool. And it's funny these days where people get excited about fast-flowing machine gun style players. I looked at the focus in Dennis's eyes and thought, I want to be just like you. Because I revered Bob Anderson when I was a child and still love him to this day. But there was something about Dennis Priestley that made me think, I want to be like you. And when I was 12, there was no youth system still. I'd moved to a different town. I'd moved to Blyth in Northumberland, famous for Dan Byrne. Mm-hmm. And for me, I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't know what darts was going to be. Maybe just a hobby for the rest of my life. But I knew I was really good. When I bought a dartboard, I was about 13 years of age. And I started hitting 180s on a regular basis.
So let's move it further forward just a little bit more then. So you get a little bit older. When was the first time you played a proper competition?
I was 16. I told the social club in Blyth that I was 18, so I lied. Mm-hmm. I gave them a fake name because I was so desperate to play. I played in a team for the Coronation Club in Blyth with some great players. But after 6 or 7 matches, they found out I was underage. So I technically broke the law just to be able to play. And I barely lost a match playing against really good players from my area. But they had to do their due diligence, easy for me to say. But then I was excluded and I had to wait until I was 18. But when I was 18, my dad said, right, now we're going to take you back to the club where you grew up at East Hartford. And I met some great people there and they showed me the ropes.
So you knew you were very good and you knew because you're winning a lot of games, you had ability. Was it a case of just playing locally to begin? Was that just the first steps? Was there any thought at that point where you thought, I could take this sport maybe a little bit seriously?
Not in the slightest. When I turned 18 and I showed up at East Hartford Social Club, I met some great people like John Mullen and Kenny Norman, who became my mentor. Gary Shanks, who's still with us up in that neck of the woods. They were so influential to me. But I saw so many great players in my first year playing for them. I ran into Gary Robson really soon after that. I didn't necessarily know who Gary was because we didn't have an internet. We had Darts World magazine and it was a case of, do you know who that is? I said, absolutely not. That's Gary Robson. He's the best player around here. And when I played against him for the first time, I gave him a game and I thought, well, maybe this is going to be fun. But it was about playing locally and getting to know people and seeing how good I really was.
So then what was next after that? What was the natural next step for yourself?
Trying different leagues, playing in Bedlington, where Chris Dobie's from, and Callan Rids, meeting influential people. I met a guy called Steve Wanless, who played in my team on a Monday night, and he eventually started introducing me to other people, and he gave me good challenges. Let's see who can hit the most tons in a season. We kept a count, so I had someone who was giving me the right kind of information and guidance. I would then be touted for the Super League in Blyth by a guy called Peter Ryby. But I didn't play very long for them because I was touted for the Sun Inn in Bedlington, and that's where I met some tremendous players. I'd known Gordon Dobie, Chris Dobie's dad, for a little bit of time playing with him in a different league. But then when I went to play for his Super League team, everything changed.
And then I suppose life took over a little bit for yourself. Everyone knows about the well-documented move to Australia. Before we talk about that, first time you were in the UK before you made the move, where was probably the furthest you took the sport?
2001. I was just starting to get really good. I was 21, 22 years of age. I played county for Northumberland for a good couple of years. And I'd met some amazing people, played some great players. I remember playing Mick Brooks of Merseyside at the Northern Club in Ashington, and I knew who he was. And that for me was a nerve-wracking match, especially because it was the second last match of the weekend. But around 2001, we had a qualifier for the national playoffs of the World Masters. And I qualified for the national playoffs at Stoke-on-Trent with Gary Robson. That was the biggest thing I'd ever done to that point. And I was a good player in the league, but I wasn't one of the great players. But that changed my mind. I played so well that day that I figured out that maybe there was something else.
But then, as we mentioned, life changes, circumstance changes, and then you make the move to Australia.
Yeah, it came at a time where everything was changing in my life. Some personal bereavement in my family, and that had a profound effect. My career away from darts, or should I say the lack of it, it was making me think that maybe I should move abroad. I was actually planning to move to the east coast of the United States to work within the banking group that I was working for, I was starting to sit some exams and do some studying in order to do that. But then I met someone and decided to move to Australia instead. It turned out to be, from a darting sense, definitely the right move. At the time, it wasn't about darts. I didn't want to play at that point. I'd fallen out of love with the game. I'd just been playing for fun with my friends at the Queen's Head and Guidepost in Northumberland, and that was just a Friday night lark. All of the serious stuff, I've binned county off, I've binned Super League off pretty much. And when I moved to Australia, it was just a case of I'm going because I want to change my life, not about darts.
When you moved out there, you mentioned that darts was something that just wasn't on the canvas. Was it something you picked up when you went over there straight away? Did you take some time away from the sport, not play altogether? What was life like for the asset out there initially?
The plan was, Henry, that when I moved to Melbourne with my then fiancée Linda, I thought, I'm taking a set of darts with me that I haven't even thrown. My friend Chris, who I've known since I was 6, he gave me a set of darts as a present before I left because I didn't know when I was going to see him again. But when I landed there, I was talking to my future father-in-law, Keith, and he said, if you're pretty good at darts, I know somewhere where you can have a game every week because there's a place in Dandenong just down the road because I was living with my in-laws in Keysborough in Victoria. And they said, there's a guy in Noble Park who knows where to play darts around here. So he took me to his barber shop and he gave me a trial. And he said, I just want to know how good you are. And I threw those darts that I took. And I averaged something like 81 over 3 legs. And he said, you've got to go to Dandenong to play there. And I thought, okay, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing, but I'll go there. And I thought, maybe I'll just try playing one night a week.
So let's move it on in terms of time scale. So you move over there for a couple of years, you play little bits, and then you take it again a little bit more seriously. You start playing the Australian tour a little bit.
Yeah, that started around 2007. I'd played some events like the Victoria Open in Moe. I'd done the Australian Masters in 2006. That was the first day I met Simon Whitlock. He doesn't really remember it. I was there just fanboying it, looking around, just trying to play anybody that won a game. Tony Fleet was there. Steve Duke Sr. was there. I knew Steve because I met him the first night I went to Super League in Victoria. So that was a bit of a baptism of fire. And obviously everybody knows who Simon Whitlock was at that point. So I met Simon. I've got a great photograph of that, by the way. I'll have to show it to you. But even at that point, I'm thinking, I just want to be a part-time player. I'm happy playing Super League. And with my friends at the MSDA in Croydon, in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, I'm happy with that. But my friends, Tony Crampton and Tony Birtwistle and Tim Gatwood, and to an extent my friend Jordan Russell, they said, do you have any idea how good you are? Now, when I lived in the Northeast, there were people saying, you are good, but there's something about the Northeast that when you're good at something, they really want to keep you down. I've spoken to other people from the Northeast, and it's exactly the same for them. When I went to Australia, they saw talent in me, and they wanted to nurture it. That was the difference.
So you very quickly then win events, and you win events to a point where this is getting a bit more serious than just doing damage on an Australian circuit. You're qualifying for things, qualifying for big things. And the first big one was the Grand Slam in 08.
Yeah, my friends Tony and Tony said, we've got to go to this Australian national singles up in Unanderra, New South Wales. And I said, I'm not really sure I can get the time off work. First event, I won it. Absolutely destroyed Rob Modra in the final, even though he beat me in the first round robin game of the weekend. So that was a great turnaround. And Rob and I would have our battles over the coming 12 months. But that 12 months was a real whirlwind. I played all over Australia. I played in Las Vegas. I played in New Zealand. And wherever I went, I thrived. But the big thing for me was the 2008 Australian Open Festival in Shoalhaven Heads. I played in a ranking tournament in the PDC, made the final. Lost to Robert Thornton. I'd amassed enough ranking points over that weekend to qualify for the Grand Slam and the Worlds, and then 3 months later I came to England to play at the Civic Hall and the Worlds.
So let's talk about that first experience at the Civic Hall. I think it's fair to say that it's an experience that is very hard to forget. You play Gary, wasn't it, in your first game? And it's fair to say that your relationship with the crowd kind of sprung upon itself straight away. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think retrospect is a great thing. It was all my fault. I mean, let's face it, I was trying to shoot them down from the first moment I was up there. I was just trying to create an impression. It was completely naive. The sunglasses thing I'd done for 20 years. more than that. Ask anybody who I played county with, that sunglasses trick, that is something that was always me. But what a lot of people tend to forget is that I'd known Gary for a very long time anyway, because he used to be a ringer for Bedlington Station Social Club in Super League when he lived in just sort of north of Berwick upon Tweed. So I'd met him a few times, and I'd actually toured with Gary in 2001 when I went to some of the BDO events with Gary Robson. So we knew each other already. So maybe that comfort of knowing my opponent made me relax a little bit, but not many people hit a 180 with their first 3 darts on TV, and I managed to hit a 12 darter on my first leg, and I suppose the rest is history a little bit.
Then the Grand Slam goes to the Worlds, and you're involved in some epic battles of that particular World Championship. The one that stands out, of course, is the Adrian Lewis one. And then in your first year at the World Championship, you get through to the quarterfinals of it. Yeah,
I was thrilled with making the last 8. Had a great following at that point from some hipster darts fans. They seemed to like what they were seeing, but it was a roller coaster ride. It meant practice on Christmas Day for the first time. It meant time away from Australia. The game with Adrian Lewis will live with me forever. That was just an epic journey. One day I'll write a book and I'll probably devote an entire chapter to that match. Beating Dennis Priestley is still the greatest game that I've ever played and probably never be topped. But I think I was so well prepared for that World Championship because of the 3 games I had at the Civic Hall. If I hadn't had those games, I think I'd have been more nervous. But by the time I played Adrian Gray, I didn't lose a leg in that match because I was so prepared.
Then I suppose you get to the point where decisions have to be made. You've played at the Grand Slam, you've played at the World Championship, got to the quarterfinals of the World Championship, your rankings going up within the PDC system. Was it at that point the decision had to be made, right, what do I do now? Do I stay in Australia? Do I stay doing what I'm doing, still become a great player of mine right there? Or do you think, right, is now the time that I may never get again that I try and give this a go professionally?
Well, during the World Championship, my first time there, I actually signed with a manager. And I've been almost with those kind of people my entire career. So I'm very grateful for that. But the initial plan was for me to go back to Australia, then return for the UK Open qualifiers in the March of 2009. But when I came over, I didn't go back because that coincided with some personal circumstances, which I won't go into. But then I stayed in England in 2009 and decided to give the tour a bit more of a go after a really big personal wobble. It wasn't easy at the start. I had some great guidance and some great friends in the likes of Mervyn King and Robert Thornton. They really helped me. But it came to October that year. My 1 year without getting paid for my job in Melbourne was coming to an end. I had to make a choice. It's either darts or back to Australia. There was no in between. There was a tournament in Killarney. If that didn't work out, I was going back to Australia. I made the final. I lost to Phil Taylor 6-0. It didn't make any difference. I made £3,000 in that weekend, and I had to go home to my apartment in North Shields, in North Tyneside, and I had to sit down and say, right, am I staying or am I going? I decided to stay, and within 3 months, I was Players Champion.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the stagecraft. First of all, where did the shirt and tie come from?
Before the 2009 UK Open, I was talking to a lot of people within the sport. Recently, we'd lost Eddie Cox, Tommy Cox's brother, who I didn't know for a great deal of time because I only saw him at the first World Championship I played. I took to him immediately. He's from North Tyneside. I had a lot in common with him, and he sadly passed away. But around about that time, we also lost Tom Kirby, a legendary PDC Irish player. And I always loved the cut of Tom's jib because he would always wear a shirt. And I'm not talking about a dart shirt, a proper shirt. And that made me think, nobody seems to be doing anything to pay tribute to Tom. So why don't I play at the UK Open with a tie, a waistcoat, and just a little bit of a tribute to him? And the first game I ever played in a shirt and tie was against Gary Anderson at the UK Open. So that was just a tribute to Tom.
Then let's talk about Circus Tavern then, 2010. I suppose that's the moment, I suppose, more than anything else in your career. When you went into that tournament, did you have any ideas of grandeur about lifting the trophy, first off?
Not at all. When I first arrived in London, I then had to get another train to Purfleet, and I was walking to the hotel in the freezing cold. And at that point, I'm thinking, maybe I should have gone back to Australia because it'll be a lot warmer right now. But I got to the hotel, got myself into a nice little bubble, and the only person I was thinking about was Dennis Priestley because I drew him in the first round. Going into that, I was very much in form. I had been to Germany a little bit prior to that, and I'd been to the World Championship where we had some interesting weather, where I had to walk 3 miles in the snow, and I was devastated to lose in the first round for me because I was in brilliant form. And when Terry beat me, I thought, someone's going to pay for this because I'm going to prepare really well. And the week before the Tavern, I won a tournament in Birmingham, and I beat Colin Osborne in the final when I went to stay at Jamie Caven's house. That set me up, and my confidence was really good. But it was all about beating Dennis, and I knew I was going to beat him. I did, and then it was just one person at a time after that.
Let's talk about the semi against Phil before we talk about the final against Mervyn, because that's the game everybody talks about. Am I right in correcting the story about the bullseye where you won it and you gave the darts to Phil?
For the first time, yes. The practice boards are upstairs. We did the bull after I'd had a somewhat famous nap on one of the floors in a dark corner because I just needed an hour to shut my eyes and get away from everybody because it's quite a close place. We did the bull. I won it. And I turned to Tommy Cox and I said, he can have it. And Phil's face was a picture. He said, thank you. And I thought, okay, now we've got a psychological battle on our hands. It almost didn't pay off because we went to a last leg decider and I didn't have the darts. So I thought, well, that was a silly move, wasn't it? But eventually I did get enough chances to get over the line.
And then Mervyn in the final, the greatest moment of your career. And I remember the picture of you when you hit that winning double. You just don't quite believe, can you, what's just sunk in, could you?
I didn't really know where I was. I was so focused at the job at hand. For me, it was just a game of darts. I didn't really look around for a couple of days. I found myself looking straight ahead. When you're playing Adrian Lewis, you're playing Steve Beaton, Dennis Priestley, Phil Taylor or Mervyn King, I really didn't care. Looking back at it now, if I had looked around, I wouldn't have got through round one. Some of my heroes from growing up, they were pretty much all in my viewpoint. So when I was playing Mervyn, who had pretty much saved my career about 7 months before that, after sitting down with me in Barnsley when he didn't have to, I gave him the ultimate payback by taking, £32,000 out of his pocket. So, yeah, it was a great moment to know that when I had a shot to win a championship, I hit it with the first dart. Tell
us about the trophy.
Well, this is the misconception, isn't it? Because a tabloid newspaper decided to write an article saying that I dropped it. I didn't drop it. It was in a cardboard box, and the plinth was in another cardboard box, and I was making a dash for the train from King's Cross back to Newcastle. They'd done some sort of protocol that morning where you had to show your ticket as well as going through the gates. So I had to put the trophy down, my suitcase, I had to stand that still, find my ticket in my wallet, hand that over. But in that time, a very inconsiderate woman with a pink suitcase, who I'm still trying to find, ran over the trophy with her suitcase and it just went smash. And my flatmate at the time, Carly, was with me the whole weekend. She said, I know you're disappointed about the trophy, but the train's going to leave, so we've got to get on it. So I had to leave it on the platform. And from there, it was a case of get on the platform. I called the PDC, and Dave Allen was so sympathetic. They said, don't worry, we'll get you a replacement. And they did. So thanks to them for that.
And then time moves on, and then other battles get drawn. And I want to talk about the Taylor Games in a second, but I want to talk about the World Cup and your partnership with Simon Whitlock. Obviously, you got to the final of that competition. 2 questions in one here. First of all, was it a no-brainer to represent Australia when you got the call? And secondly, what do you recall of that famous final against England?
Playing for Australia was never a doubt for me. After everything Dart Players Australia and the country of Australia had done for me, when I came here, I wore that flag on my heart. And I said, after everything you've done for me as a country and as a culture, I'm going to do this for you as well as for myself. As far as the final run is concerned, Simon was in great form, I was in great form, we were one of the premier partnerships. And let's face it, Simon Whitlock is one of the greatest pairs players that will ever play this game. That's why we were so good. But when it came to the final, it was very different. We didn't care who we were playing until we got to the final. But most of that final, it was all about what happened backstage. Adrian Lewis turned into a totally different monster when he put on the England shirt. Phil barely said a word. Simon barely said a word, but the banter was between me and Adrian, and it didn't stop backstage, it actually transponded to the stage as well.
It's fair to say you've gone through your career about your fair share of run-ins with individuals. I suppose the famous one is with Phil, and people mention the word, or the tabloid press mention the word feud on a couple of occasions. The CM Punk thing, the UK Open thing when you wave goodbye to him. From your perspective, in your own words, how would you categorise your rivalry with Phil and some of the key events that happened in that rivalry?
I think it goes with the time that a lot of people were perceived by the press of being afraid of Phil. And I just wanted to prove that we weren't. I wasn't just doing it for me, I was doing it for everyone. I wanted to show that Phil maybe is the best at that time. He was in such amazing form. And I'd had a sample of playing him at the Tavern and a couple of other venues as well. But I wanted to show that if you go up there and you give everything you've got and you show that you're not afraid, things are possible. So when it came to the middle of 2011, the asset that came out of me in that summer, it was because of confidence. I had won 2 Players' Championships in Crawley that summer, as well as one in Barnsley. And sandwiched in, that was the UK Open of 2011, where I'd beaten Gary Anderson, I'd obviously beaten Phil, and what came out there was just me saying, I'm not afraid. I want to play anybody. And the run I was given, Anderson, Taylor and Wade. And I couldn't get through Wade because I'd given so much on the Saturday.
Was it blown out of proportion, some of the things that were written, some of the things that were said?
No, I don't think so. I think the tabloid press maybe did try and blow it up, but there were elements of we shouldn't have been in the same room at certain points. I know that when I beat him at the UK Open, he did want to confront me, which was fair enough. I was too busy talking to Dave Clark. But when we played at the European Championship just a month or 6 weeks later, me and Phil were fine. It was something that went on for a few days. I didn't get my right of reply in the Daily Mirror, which I didn't think was very fair. But when we played at the European Championship in Dusseldorf, and we had a belter of a game, ITV Sport were really, really happy that they got that match, and Sky were devastated that they didn't get the rivalry of the summer. But we had a great game, and if it wasn't for a couple of massive checkouts from Phil when it was 7-7, I would have got him again.
Finally then, retirement, the end of your career. As a sports person, do you naturally know when the time is right to call it quits? Or did you feel like you were stepped away from the professional game, maybe with more to give?
It's a good question. I think the last competitive darts I played, apart from a couple of days here at the MODUS Super Series a couple of years ago, which I thoroughly enjoyed, it was during COVID. I played an awful lot for 5-6 months, and so much so that my shoulder went into haywire. I needed physiotherapy, surgery on different parts of my upper body, and my body was saying, can you do this anymore? And I'm only at this stage in my early 40s. But as far as my darts career is concerned, I haven't effectively retired. I haven't put the full stop down, but I've worked so hard on my broadcasting skills that I've been pulled in lots of different directions with that, and that's what I enjoy at the minute.
Would you give it one more go, or are you just happy sitting in studios now for the rest of your days?
I haven't drawn a line under it, but with my skill set these days and what I'm enjoying doing, promoting what I believe is the future of this sport, I think that's more important than what I want to do with a dart in my hand.
I'll tell you what, he's quite good at the talking, so much so that we've completely overrun the schedule for this programme. Nico, thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you, as it always is, sat next to you in these chairs. That's the latest edition of the Tungsten Talk here at the MODUS Super Series.